you, Eustace. Welcome back, dearest listeners. You are back like a bad penny, a pernicious penny, a haunted penny that keeps coming back to stain your embarrassed trouser in polite company. Although you protest, 'tis the haunted trousers. Everyone is looking at you in disgust, contempt, a head-shake ridicule. Your protestations are for naught. They suspect your drinking habit. They suspect your disregard for polite discourse, your libertine views, your shaman ways. There's no place for you in this society, Mr. Troublemaker, Mr. Pissmire Pantaloons, Mr. Shameless Shaman. They say, go back to the colonies where you belong. They cry, you're not fit in polite society, you gin-addled fool. Then they cry in unison, would you care to be in our gang? Our gang, our gang. Would you care to be in our gang? Oh yes. You simply place your hat on your head, turn and walk towards the door and think, I'm the leader and always will be. As you trip over the gallows glitter tree on your way out, saying curses, and hope that the local militia are not called out this time. Dear listeners, I'm in the relative safety of the vinyl vault with Donna P. We are assembling some worldly possessions and about to take our 20% discount voucher to sample the nefarious delights of the Hotel Lazarus, the new German business in town. What do you think we need to take? A torch? Camera? How about my travel kaplunk?
Okay, whatever, amigo. Now pay attention. We need to find out what is going on at that hotel. You know I suspect paranormal zeitgeist by the hand of that reclusive Scorpion prog rock drummer. That's what we need to find out. However, what they don't know is our secret weapon.
You think Herr Gross Hausberg has never found Stretcher Munching? They did used to live in the old station hotel after all. Well, until the fire. Until the rebranding, so to speak.
Well, I guess we will find out. Come on, let's go. Check into the Lazarus Hotel. I'm feeling like an extreme situation may be ordered on room service tonight, amigo.
Donna P and a radio presenter consort are walking along a darkened Gallatry street with some light luggage in their hands. They stop outside the Hotel Lazarus and look up into the sporadically lit rooms above. They will not be alone tonight.
Well, here we go, amigo. What name should we use for the register? They cannot suspect a thing.
The pair walk into the reception area. Piddler takes the lead with a shifty-looking muse rag-tagging along behind her, carrying a bulging bag, which to the untrained eye contains an overnight Batman suit and an Evel Knievel stunt bike, although the travel kaplunk could be secreted about his person somewhere, perhaps under the long black overcoat. Welcome to the Lazarus. What is your name, please?
It's Secret. Mr. and Mrs. Secret, we have a reservation. I booked the Oscar Wilde boudoir.
Very good. Alles is in Ordnung. Now your clothes, give them to me. Herr Shirt took their things and led them to the lift. A couple of minutes of lift music later, they were all stood outside the Oscar Wilde boudoir. The German clone opens the door and coughed slightly. The piddler pulled out some loose change and placed it into the German's hand, and they walked in. Paying guests, and both felt different somehow. More polite, more worldly worn, more stretched at the chin.
Well, amigo, I guess there's nothing much more we can do but wait.
A Victorian April moon looks down judgmentally on the dark cobbled streets of the Gallatry tonight. The gas lamps flicker the gilt shadows through the smoky clag of the darkness, struggling to find a recognised face or friend or foe, all seem to be the same, bewhiskered, darkly dressed gentlemen about their night business, like every other night here, in Gallatry. And what's this, dear heart? Two darkening figures leave their handcart beyond the locked gates of the cemetery, clamber over the wall, mindful of the dull metallic clanking from their handsacks. 'Tis a bad to-do, with so much ne'er-do-well clobber about their decidedly shabby, genteel personages in the graveyard this April night. Shush, will you, Mr. Grace? We must find the right one, or his nibs will not be happy.
Shush yourself. I know this game, Mr. Herbert. I shan't call you Ducky Herbert. You're a jammy tart and no mistake. I've been at this racket for years. I don't need to be told my business by you or any of your entrepreneurial kind.
And what's that meant to mean, eh? I'll bleed you with this here shovel and no mistake. 'Twas I, as I recall, who made this little venture a capital one. 'Twas I, as I recall, that got his nibs to pay regular coin for our little mining enterprise. As I recall, Mr. Grace, 'twas all for your personal amusement before. You varlet, you should have hung on to what you did. At least this pays dividends, so to speak.
Shh! I smell flowers. We're getting close. Here we are, mister, as I said, just like the Parish Gazette said, the fresh one from this afternoon. Look, see, Miss Emma Emsey Hammer, age 17. You just need to follow your nose. The flowers, you see, but what do you care other than the coin? You lot are the curse of this game, the professional resurrectionist. You have no craft, no personal connection with what we do. It's just about the money for you. I love mine.
We'll love it with that. Now start digging, you clack devil. Well, Mr. Grace, although you're a dog and there's no mistake, I must hand it to you. You know how to find 'em good. This one'll fetch a pretty penny. Now, let's get her on the wagon and up to his nibs at the Cock Inn before we get spotted by them rozzers. Mr. Stretch and Mr. Munchin are sitting in their office-cum-sitting room smoking and drinking coffee. A plethora of dusty scientific equipment fills every surface in the room. Microscopes, telescopes, electroscopes, galvanoscopes, and horoscopes. Oh, a visitor at last. A case. Mrs. Piddle, get the door.
If you please, sir, there's a gentleman here to see you.
Don't leave the poor blighter in the hall. Show him in, Mrs. Piddle. Show him in.
Mr. Stretch, Mr. Munchin, this is Mr. Wilde. He has come up from London to see you. He says he knows you, Mr. Munchin.
Mr. Wilde, Oscar, mon cher. How are you? When was the last time we met? It was New York City in '86, wasn't it? Come in, take a seat. Mrs. Piddle, this calls for a drink. Fetch the bourbon and beer. The unmistakable figure of a young Oscar Wilde walks into the room with a large, flat, brown paper package under his arm, which he places carefully onto the floor, leaning against the chaise longue as he takes a seat. Let me introduce my partner, Mr. Aloysius Stretch. This is my friend, Mr. Wilde. He's a poet. We met in the Americas, don't you know?
How do you do, Mr. Wilde? I'm not sure I know your work.
You will, Mr. Stretch, you will. Are you the Mr. Stretch famed from the case of the haunted ventriloquist puppet that I remember reading about some time ago?
I am he, sir, although these events cost me dear, Mr. Wilde. I am now cursed with an affliction.
Stretch falls silent and looks into the fire. Wilde looks slightly embarrassed and looks at Munchin quizzically. Well, you see, Wilde, Stretch was dispatching the haunted puppet by throwing it into the fire. The evil blighter bit him, and now he suffers with terrible automatophobia. Look, I'll show you. Mr. Stretch, what's that? Munchin points across the room.
A cigarillo case.
And
a shrunken head. Really, Munchin, I don't really see the need to...
At this point, Mrs. Piddle walks into the room carrying a tray with drinks on it. Munchin points to the tray and asks Stretch once more, "And what's that?"
A bottle of gear. Curse that damned puppet.
You see, Mr. Wilde, it also cost him his membership to the Psychical Society. Tell Mr. Wilde what happened, Stretch.
Well, I was making my speech after receiving the Medal for Bravery in front of the whole society. I had just had the medal presented by the notoriously overweight and self-conscious society patron as I stood up and said, "Thank you, Baroness Bernadette Grossgirdle. This is such an honour from someone of such noble girth as yourself." And it kind of went downhill from there.
The three gentlemen reflected on this story of woe, sipped their drinks, and then Munchin broke the silence. "So then, Mr. Wilde, what brings you to see us here in Gallatry? It can't be the constitutional air or the witty banter, that's for sure, I'll wager."
You are correct, Mr. Munchin. It is better to be correct than not to be a bit wrongish. Right. Hula vash. Mr. Munchin, I've lost my wit.
Interesting. Please continue. Mr. Wilde stood up and opened the package sitting by his side. He untied the string and the brown paper fell to the floor. He held a framed picture in his hands and then placed it on the mantelpiece. All looked carefully at the image put before them. "It's a fine portrait of you, Mr. Wilde. It's very good indeed. Who painted it?"
That's why I'm here. I need you to find the artist, as I fear, gentlemen, that this portrait is haunted. It's evil, and it's taking over my life. After I had it painted, I noticed that I wasn't as witty as I used to be, and I started to sit and write. I found that I was completely stuck. Blocked. Every time I looked up at the portrait, my own smug, witty, superior face was staring back at me. Then it started to goad me. All of this was strange until it was the latest twist that compelled me to seek you out.
Twist, Mr. Wilde?
Last week I found it having a drinks party with my young gentleman callers behind my back. This is not on, Mr. Munchin. It would be the ruin of me if this picture, this thing, is wittier, cleverer, and more attractive than I am. I need you to find the artist, to find out how to break this curse.
Whom do we seek, pray, Mr. Wilde?
A fellow by the name of Graham Day. By providential hap, I do have a clue to his whereabouts that might help your quest. He said that if I was ever in Gallatry, I should try the Cock Inn. Although at the time I thought it was just a spiteful slur on my sexuality. Is there such a place here, Mr. Munchin?
Mr. Munchin looked at Mr. Wilde and then Mr. Stretch and replied, "Yes, there is. The Cock Inn is a place of ill repute, of backroom poker and, well, debauchery. We will find your artist, Mr. Wilde. Come, Mr. Stretch, let's go and show this Babylon whore pub what gentlemen situationists can do." The same old moon looks down on the righteous and the damned without a blink, a care, or a magistrate's beady gaze now. It scuds its milky face across a back alley behind the old Cock Inn on King Street. Mr. Herbert and Mr. Grace are unloading their cargo. "So then, Captain, was it worth the wait? She's a pearl, eh?"
"I'll be the judge of that, Mr. Herbert. I'll be the judge of that."
The captain pulls open the sacking shroud to reveal the cadaver. He holds his candle close and inspects the grey skin intently.
"Very nice, Mr. Herbert, Mr. Grace. The best yet, and that's no mistake. Now take your money and be gone. I have work to do."
"Yes, sir. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Captain." The captain locks the gate behind his leaving guests and puts on his leather apron. He begins to sharpen his long, long knife as the wood sods under the large brass vessel begin to crackle.
"Well, my dear, shall we begin? Brewing tonight, my dear. Brewing tonight."
The captain is happy in his labour. The slicing, the sawing, the placing of the sweet meat into the vessel, the brewing. He finds himself humming a little tune to himself under the candle flicker of industry as the malodorous fumes swirl into the night.
Use it on your shirts, use it on your feet. It works out to all you fancy, it just works a treat. Use it on Mr. your stallion, whatever your compunction. Use the very finest Captain's universal unction.
The captain is now holding a large jug under the tap on the side of the large copper vessel, and a white fluid is issuing forth. He then begins to decant the milky brew into many bottles, and after a jug's worth, he seals them with corks and places them into crates, one after the other. The side of the crate reads, Captain's Unction, the universal embrocation for various applications. Brewed here in Gallowtree again. As the crows play hangman's twig in the treetops, a carriage draws up below, along a cobbled street, King Street, to be precise. Here, cabby, this is it, I believe, the Cock Inn. How much do we owe you? Not now, Stretch, not now. Come on, we need to find that artist. What's his name? Mr. Day? The Cock Inn is full to the rafters with layabouts, ne'er-do-wells, the genuinely shifty hearseats, the shabby riff-raffery, and the aging musicians. You know, the usual crowd. As Mr. Munchin opens the door and walks in with Stretch following behind, their entrance is met with immediate suspicion from the unwashed, uneducated, and unsavoury patrons, as Munchin sniffs the eau de trompe in his cultured nose.
Oh, what have we here then? A right couple of lardy-dars, and that's no mistake. You're looking for a bit of candling tonight then, gents?
The landlord, the captain, seeing the crowd turn and pour the newly arrived gentleman swiftly arise to intervene, no doubt sensing a visit from the law soon after.
Good evening, gentlemen, good evening. And what can I be doing for you?
Mr. Munchin turns to Mr. Stretch and says quietly, You'd better let me handle this. Yes, landlord. We are weary travellers on the road and seek some refreshment. We seek an amuse-bouche, as if off the beaten track, off the menu, and I'll wager send us off our heads.
Good, gentlemen. Why not try the house special? It's a ginger ale called Black Galleon. It's spiced with harpies curtains and will make you scream like a penny tart back alley knee trembler. Make no mistake.
Sounds like our kind of tipple, Mr. Stretch. We'll take 2 pints, landlord. 2 glasses of orangey liquid appear before them. The pair stand at the bar looking about as comfortable as an orphan newly arrived at Mr. Slenderman's workhouse with more tattooed on his forehead.
So, what do you think then, gentlemen?
It's got a very peculiar flavour. It's unctuous, almost fortified with flesh. What's it got in it? I'm a connoisseur of the unusual, the unnatural, after my travels in the Americas. The captain simply touched his nose, winked, and said,
I brew it here special-like for good gentlemen like yourselves with added unction. So what travels brings you here to the Cock Inn, mister?
Mr. Munchin, and this is my good friend and ally, Mr. Stretch. We seek some information, landlord. We seek an artist by the name of Day, a Mr. Graham Day.
An artist, you say? You gent have come to the right place, then.
We have no such artist here.
Drunken local, the entrepreneurial resurrectionist Herbert, reinforces the captain's warning and adds his 2 penneth worth to the discourse. Ain't that the truth? He slams down his drink and grabs Mr. Stretch by the arm. We don't like strangers here, looking for things. That's my pint here, and you can't touch this. The drunken scrub then suddenly throws his drink into Stretch's face. Mr. Stretch doesn't react. He slowly mops his face down with his handkerchief and begins to remove his overcoat. Oh no, not again. Mr. Stretch takes his own drink and downs it in one, dabs his mouth, and says,
"It's time you learnt some manners, sir."
Stretch then slid his left foot at an angle across the floor and assumed the classic fisticuffs position with his left jabbing fist gyrating in front of the drunken assailant's face, goading him in as he moved side to side with his intricate footwork, learnt in many a barroom brawl as a boy. His feet got faster and faster until it was a blur, and then Stretch strikes his first blow.
Don't speak with your mouth full. You can't touch this. Stand for a lady. You can't touch this. Pass the port to the left. You can't touch this.
The ruffian is swaying on his feet. Stretch then adds,
And never speak to me unless you're spoken to.
Stretch winds up and haymakers the cab, who takes off, arcing into a crash on the floor as glasses and bottles skitter over the floor.
You can't touch this, sir. It's hammer time.
Mr. Stretch is standing over the prostrate body on the floor. Mr. Munchin moves between them deftly and kneels beside the innate figure and examines his condition. Well, Mr. Stretch, you certainly taught him some manners. He's so very unconsciously polite.
It's time you gentlemen were leaving now. You've outstayed your welcome. Be gone.
Yes, I believe we have. Come, Mr. Stretch, let's go. As Munchin stood up, he pulled something from the ruffian's pocket, and then the two situationists left the Cock Inn in somewhat of a state, and walked briskly along the street, back in search of a cab. Taxi! The station hotel, please, driver.
Right-yo, governor.
Oh, Mr. Munchin, I'm glad you're back. Something terrible has happened. You'd best come and look.
Calm yourself, dear Mrs. Biddle. Whatever is the matter, my dear?
It's in the wardrobe. It's your pantaloons. They're dancing on their own, as if they're possessed by the devil himself.
Munchin left the room, and Mr. Stretch poured a glass of brandy for the still shocked Mrs. Biddle. Munchin returned some time later, and the pair looked up at him expectantly. Well, Mrs. Biddle, you appear to be correct. Very curious that my pair of Arabic bedroom pantaloons should chance and jig that way. I've locked them in the wardrobe, cast a temporary evocation, and left a medicine wheel to guard their threshold. They smelt strange. Now tell me, Mrs. Biddle, where did you get them laundered?
At the Chinese place on Canker Street.
Well, Mr. Stretch, I think you should pay a visit to this Chinese laundry post haste and find out why my pantaloons are dancing like a crazed dervish. I need to think this vexatious conundrum through.
On my way. I shall return as expeditiously as I am able.
Munchin sat back in his armchair, loaded a pipe, and took a long slug of bourbon. He laid out the contents of the ruffian's pocket that he deftly purloined in the pub. Munchin raised his eyebrows, stood up, and began to rummage through the newspapers that are lying around every surface in the room, going through them roughly, looking for something. At last, the mist's clear in this case. Ah, Mr. Stretch, so how was your visit to Canker Street? I suspect it was somewhat insightful, shall I say one word? Unction, perchance?
Great Scott, Munchin, how did you guess?
C'est la guerre. Pray continue.
Well, Canker Street is a frightful place of many shops and side courtyards where all kinds of base business is conducted. I soon found the laundry, Mr. Wassy Woos, and spoke to the owner, Mr. Woo. He told me this was the third complaint this week. He also told me that he always launders trousers and pantaloons with a special starch to get them very stiff. He showed me a bottle of the stuff, a milky tincture called Captain's Unction, the universal embrocation for various applications.
Pray go on, Mr. Stretch.
Then I walked up and down the street and noticed that every shop had a board or picture in the window advertising the use of Captain's Unction. Mrs. Coombs the baker, the Spanish barber, Elbow Grease, and even Laszlo, specialist bookshop at the end on the corner. This one seemed of more interest to our quest. What kind of bookshop uses unction?
Indeed. Did it also supply artist's materials, such as oil paints?
By Agile, Munchin, how did you know? So I went into the bookshop and met Mr. Laszlo, a very curious fellow indeed. The place was full of large jars of different splendiferous colours, and he explained to me he makes his own oil paints, which he purveys by special order to discerning clients. Laszlo uses the unction as the oil base for his pigments.
Can I take it our Mr. Graham Day was one of those discerning clients?
Indeed he was, although Laszlo said he hadn't seen him in months as he owed him a debt for a special item. So I bought it.
Special item? Interesting. Let's have a look at it. Stretch pulled out the brown paper parcel, pushed all the newspapers onto the floor, and ripped it open. It was a brightly coloured cardboard box with a strange device pictured on the front. The words at the top read, Kaplunk. What the devil is that for? Open it up and let's get it working.
So then, Munchin, are you going to tell us what is going on?
Stretch began to assemble the contents of the box as Munchin stood at the mantelpiece and began to fill his bong, with what looked like a lethal load for any lesser mortal. Well, my suspicions were first aroused by the dancing pantaloons, and I realized that I had smelt that strange smell before, but couldn't remember from where at first. Whilst you were at the laundry on Canker Street, I remembered it was at the Cock Inn, from the strange drink we had. Remember when you were fighting, it got your trousers dancing around as well, didn't it?
Indeed, sir.
I remember that I had taken something from the ruffian's pocket in the pub, after you had enlightened him, so to speak. It was a copy of the Gallotree Parish Gazette from the previous week. I noticed that a funeral notice had been ringed with a red pencil. The notice read, "The funeral of Miss Emma M.C. Hammer will be conducted on Tuesday, 12th April at 11 a.m. Non-family mourners are welcome as the deceased was an orphan. Flowers can be sent to the Gallotree Orphanage for the attention of Mr. Slenderman." At the bottom of the page was scrawled the words, "Delivery, Canker Street, Friday." I then went searching the newspapers for a story that I guessed may have been there, and sure enough, it was. The grave of Miss M.C. Hammer was robbed last week, on the very night of her funeral. So there is a connection between M.C. Hammer, the dancing pantaloons, and the Cock Inn. And so I guess it's the captain's universal unction. So what connects our haunted portrait to the Cock Inn? Mr. Day, and what links Mr. Day to Canker Street? The paint supplier, which is again linked to the unction. So I put 8 and 3 together, and I have a theory that I need to explore. I think that unction is made from resurrected bodies, and therefore some malevolent spirit is haunting whatever it ends up used in, but in varying degrees. I think that the paint that Mr. Day used to paint Oscar's portrait is haunted. I need to find by what mind before we can attempt an exorcism. It's time I prepared for a little walk. Munchin locked the door and began to undress and then cover himself with the coloured powders that he kept in a locked box on the top of the mantel. His pipe glowed strongly as he took large puffs of the sweet-smelling contents, and large clouds of smoke filled the room in a fog. He donned several feathers on leather ties around his arms and head, and sat cross-legged on the floor, rocking backwards and forwards. It's time to evoke the chief. Let him come. I will spirit walk as chief Yokiro Taco Bell. Yokiro Taco Bell. Yokiro Taco Bell, come to me. Stretch sat watching Munchin chant and drift into a deep catatonic state. He knew all he could do was wait, as the only thing he can actually do, if needed, was to administer Munchin a lethal dose of cocoa grain. He sat looking at the kaplunk now built, flicking through the instruction manual to pass the time, the coloured straws and marbles glistening in the firelight. Stretch began to nod off. Then a sudden noise, very close, made him sit up abruptly. Munchin is still slumped, groaning in the middle of the floor. He looks at the portrait on the mantel. Its eyes seem to burn intently in this light, almost staring into his very soul.
Jesus!
He muttered under his breath. Then a slight movement caught his eye, and Stretch leaned forward, intently looking at the kaplunk tower as a plastic straw began to slide itself from the stack on its own. Slowly and slowly, out it comes until it is hovering in front of his face, before dropping straight into the box lid. Stretch refers to the instruction booklet, looks up, and says,
"Game on, rancorous spirit."
Stretch turns the tube so that the hole at the base is facing him and begins to select a straw. He looks carefully and selects one, pulling it out slowly. A single marble cascades through the straw thicket and lands in his tray.
Damn, this is harder than one thinks. I better play careful for Munchin's sake, or we'll be getting the hypodermic with many more marbles.
The tube turns itself on its axis and faces the portrait staring down at him from the mantelpiece. A straw begins to move on its own, and then stops. And then another moves instead.
Aye, Mr. Devil Demon Spirit, once you touch the straw, you must commit to it. This will not be the night of the cheating dead, not on my watch.
Many straws later and many marbles sit in both trays. Stretch estimated 10 in each, with another 20 or so above and in the straw jungle. The portrait's ghostly force has selected the next straw. As it starts to move, the marbles judder, and when it is removed completely, there is a clatter cascade of all the marbles into the tray facing the portrait.
Are you all right there, Munchin?
Mr. Munchin begins to come around and says, "Oh, good play, Mr. Stretch, good play. I think we can give Mr. Oscar Wilde his portrait back now. Now, where's that bourbon? I'm parched." The good gentlemen toast their glasses.
We go where others far to.
Thank you, Eustace. Welcome back, dearest listeners. It's another lovely morning for morning here in our very own hot tub of broken dreams. That is Gallatry. I'm back in the studio after spending a night playing all-night kaplunk with Donna P. Blimey, how much bourbon did we drink? Still, I think I won, as I found a very old faded telegram in my pocket this morning. It reads,
Mr. Munchin and Mr. Stretch, stop. Thank you for your help. Stop. Portrait back to normal. Stop. Novel coming along. Stop. Yours, Oscar. End.
Under the centenary bridge, the voices rise louder and louder in unison.
Universal action. Use your gumption. Use the very finest Captain Universal action. In Gallatry. Again and again.
You have been listening to Gallatry, a community-funded local radio station. I'm Adam Aardvark. Max couldn't be around at the end of the show. He often needs to lie down in a darkened room and sort of, well, convalesce. If you enjoyed today's show and want to know more or simply express a simple and not very cogent opinion, then email us at welcometogallatry@gmail.com. You can tell us what you think, although we might already know what you think. Or failing that, if you genuinely have no idea, we can helpfully provide some new ideas that you can call your very own. Ideas that you can share with your friends and family and become a much more interesting and likeable person, if only to yourself. This has been a Gallatry Entertainment broadcast recorded in a haunted pub in Gallatry. No, honestly, voices appeared on the recordings that we later had to edit out. I think we got them all, but who's to know for sure? Anyway, Gallatry is performed by Max Black, written and recorded by Max Black and Adam Aardvark, is copyright Gallatry Productions 2015. Thanks for listening. But remember, on your next journey home, Gallatry may be just around the corner.
Just